Hello guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another of my videos. Today I'm going to bring you guys the Bloodline Mode tier list. Now if you guys enjoyed this video, remember hit that like button, subscribe to the combo for more. Also, if you guys have any suggestions, feel free to comment them below. I do read every comment and reply to them eventually. Also, if you guys differ from my opinion, feel free to comment below what you guys think the tier, what should be in the appropriate tier. Alright, so the Bloodline we're actually going to be starting out with is going to be Akuma. Now, Akuma's mode is actually very basic for an Akuma. However, you can get a perfect Susanoo and you do get all the normal Akuma abilities. Not to mention that the weapon spec does have a bug right now where you can thread blade 3 people in and it actually will one-shot them, which I do not think is an intended feature of the game. So for that reason alone, Akuma's mode is going to be in the really good tier. Next up is actually going to be Golden Joke. Now, Golden Joke's mode, it drains chi, however most people do not use it, but the second mode of Golden Joke's mode is actually pretty good, not only for combos but also does drain chi when you attack people, and it does give you chi back. So for that reason alone, it is going to be at the bottom of really good for now. Next up is actually going to be Ashen Storm. Ashen Storms, in my opinion, is not actually that good, but it is going to be in the good tier simply because it does give you a ton of movement speed. It does give you a ton of stats. However, the actual ability of it actually isn't that great. Next up is actually going to be Arashi. Arashi, in my opinion, the mode is the only thing good about it, but the mode is absolutely insane, and the mode actually does make a bunch of M1 combos actually possible in this game. The second mode of Arashi is actually extremely overpowered because you can combine it with things like Thread Blade, Rengoku Pool, stuff like that, and to make M1 combos really overpowered in the game. Next up is actually going to be Azim Senko. Azim Senko's, in my opinion, is actually going to be at the bottom of really good, simply because Azim Senko's mode ability stuns. The C spec of it actually stuns, unlike Dio Senko, if I'm remembering right, and unlocks Senko. Senko Dio Senko, I'm pretty sure just does damage. I think Dio Senko might stun, but Azim Senko's is actually really good for the stun. Next up is actually going to be Bankai. Bankai, in my opinion, is going to be our first broken mode bloodline because the mode of it, the C spec, actually does do a ton of mode drain, and there is a bug right now with it. If you guys haven't seen that bug, go check out the video. It's on my channel. But yeah, Bankai does actually have a bug with the mode. Not to mention the mode actually gives you a ton of stats, and it increases your M1 damage. Next up is going to be Black Shock. Black Shock is going to be at the top of good. Now, the reasoning for this is because Black Shock's mode actually has N lag to it, and it is a Z spec. So basically, you can actually use it, and you can make combos alone just off of the Z spec of Black Shock. However, the speed is actually pretty good, but the stats aren't all that great. Next up is just going to be Bubble. Bubble, in my opinion, is probably going to be at the middle of good. I don't think Bubble's mode is anything to like blow your mind, but it actually is really good, and the ability of it is also really good. It also buffs your M1 damage, and you can fly while using it. Next up is going to be Clay. Now, Clay is actually going to be our first bad one. I feel like Clay's mode, it does not hold up compared to other modes. Nectar actually has Clay's mode, but basically just a lot better. And Clay's mode just lets you fly. It drains your stamina insanely fast, though, I'm pretty sure. And whenever you use the ability, it actually will drain your mode. So you guys need to watch out when using Clay. I feel like the mode is probably the worst part about Clay. Next up is going to be Dongan. Dongan is actually going to be meh because I feel like while it is extremely annoying to face Dongan's mode, it actually is not all that good in of itself. And this Bloodline tier list is about the modes of the Bloodlines. Next up is just going to be Dio Senko. Now, Dio Senko, in my opinion, is actually going to be at the bottom of really good. I'm going to be putting it below Azim Senko because it actually does give the same amount of speed bonus, and it gives around the amount of same stats. But I feel like Azim Senko mode is just better than Dio Senko's. But they are very similar, which is why they're right next to each other. Next up is just going to be Forge. Now, Forge, in my opinion, is going to be above Akuma and really good for the same reasons as Akuma. It gives you M1, your block is better, you can get a perfect Susanoo, your M1 range is increased, all that good stuff. Not to mention that the forged weapon spec, it does have a bug. Almost every Akuma has a bug, isn't that kind of funny? Next up is actually going to be Wanziame. Now, Wanziame, I'm going to put it at the top of meh because while it does make you invisible and you can drain chi while it is activated, it just seems kind of pointless to me because Golden Joke, you could drain chi with that and it's just a lot better. Like, I don't ever see the reason of using the shark mode. It is on Z spec, so you can't use Dune's Fate or anything like that either. Next up is actually going to be Ink. Ink is going to be at the top of good because Ink's mode is pretty much what makes Ink good. Not to mention that your M1 range actually extends. Basically, the mode of Ink, what it does is make your M1 ranged, but it also is just a normal M1, so you can apply things like shock control and stuff like that. It is really good, and not to mention that the C spec and the weapon spec of it is also pretty good. Next up, it's just going to be Apollo Sand, Iron Sand. Now, Iron Sand's going to be at the bottom of good. The only reasoning that is actually going to be in good now is because they did add a C-spec to it. So now you get super long M1s. The M1s are actually stronger, and the C-spec of it actually does stun and do a decent amount of damage. Next up is just going to be Eternal. Eternal, in my opinion, is going to be in the broken tier below Bankai. Eternal's C-spec is pretty much what makes Eternal broken in the first place, in my opinion. The C-spec extends a bunch of combos and makes a bunch of combos possible, not to mention there is a C-spec glitch you can do with Eternal. It also gives you a decent amount of stats and makes your speed a little bit faster. Next up is going to be Normal Joke. Now, Normal Joke is going to be probably like around here in the good tree. Now, the reasoning for this is because it doesn't give nearly as much stats as Golden Joke. It isn't as good as Golden Joke. It's pretty much just Golden Joke, but worse. Next up is going to be Kokatsu. Now, Kokatsu is going to be at the top of Med because the weapon spec of Kokatsu is actually pretty decent. However, it is a Z spec, so you guys won't be able to use things like Dune's Fate, and you have to combine it with the C spec, which will make the whole point of using the Bloodline by itself pointless. Next up is actually going to be Kaijin. Kaijin is actually going to be at the bottom of Med. Now, the reasoning for this is because the monkey, while it is extremely annoying, it actually isn't very good, but it is really, really annoying. So if you want to annoy people in duels or fighting and stuff like that, use Kaijin and use the monkey ability. Also, the weapon spec is pretty decent, all things considered. It used to be broken, but they actually fixed it a long time ago. Next up is going to be Karada. Karada is going to be at the bottom of bad. I don't feel like I really need to explain this too much. I'm sure you guys know that Karada's mode is just really, really bad in general. It's just like, it does like 30k. You punch the ground and stuff like that. It's just not good. Next up is actually going to be Kenichi. Kenichi is actually going to be at the top of broken. Now, the reasoning for this is because the second mode of Kenichi actually is an auto dodge. Not to mention they actually get a free thread blade from Kenichi itself. So you don't even need thread blade. Also, your M1s actually get increased from the mode. Next up is going to be Doke. Now, Doke, in my opinion, is going to be in the really good tree below Akuma and above Gotojoke. Now, the reasoning for this is because the C-spec actually applies to the first ability plus 30k, and it is an AoE, so it's really, really easy to hit compared to the first ability of it. It also buffs your M1 damage, and it makes a lot of Doke combos possible. Next up is going to be Concho. Now, Concho is going to be at the top of really good. Now, the reasoning for this is because the C-spec actually drains your chi. However, the damage was lowered recently, but that doesn't negate the chi drain, and also is a pretty good stun. It also increases your M1 damage when you actually attack people as well, and also drains their chi whenever you auto people. Now, next up is going to be Minakami. Now, Minakami is actually going to be below Azarashi, above Forged Akuma. Now, the reasoning for this is because the M1s of Minakami was actually buffed by a ton. One M1 could do like 90k with Minakami if you actually have someone stunned now. Not to mention that the weapon spec is actually pretty good, because whenever you use the weapon spec on someone, it's basically just like a free combo extender. It's really, really good. Next up is going to be Nectar. Nectar is actually going to be at the bottom of Men. Now, the reasoning for this is because it's just basically better Clay. There's not much else to say about that. It does the same exact thing as Clay, but it stuns instead of just, you know, dealing damage. You can fly with it as well. Next up is going to be Okami. Now, Okami is actually going to be in the second of bad. Now, the reasoning for this is because I just don't feel like it's very good. It's Rengoku. It's one of Rengoku's abilities. If you guys do not know that, it's the exact same thing as one of Rengoku's abilities. So there's really no reason to ever use this mode, if I'm going to be honest. Next up is going to be Paper. Now, Paper's mode, in my opinion, is going to be at the bottom of good. Now, the reasoning for this is because while it is a Z-spec and you could fly, it's kind of like Nectar and Clay, but it actually does increase your M1 damage. Not to mention that the Z-spec of it is actually pretty good. It does like 60k damage in one shot, and it actually is really good for combo extending. Next up is actually going to be Ryan Akuma. Now, Ryan Akuma is actually going to be above Forge and above Akuma on the really good tree. Now, the reasoning for this is because Ryan, same thing as Forge, M1, has a good C-spec, has a good weapon spec, and it just it increases your block. It's just a really good Bloodline mode to have in general. Next up is going to be Rengoku. Rengoku is actually going to be at the top of really good because the Rengoku's mode is kind of what makes Rengoku so good. You have 5 different abilities in the single mode, which makes it extremely overpowered. Not to mention the stats it gives you is actually pretty insane. Next up is going to be Ren Shiki. Ren Shiki is actually going to be at the bottom of good. Now, the only reason it's actually going to be in good is because Ren Shiki's mode makes one of its abilities even possible. I don't know why they made it like that, but you have to have Ren Shiki's mode on to use one of the abilities. Also, the weapon spec of it is pretty good. It is a stun, and the C spec, you could chase people around with it. It's pretty fun to use in general. It's just not very good. Next up, it's going to be Riser Akuma. Now, Riser Akuma is going to be below Bankai and Broken. Now, the reasoning for this is because Riser Akuma's mode ability actually does the exact same thing as Bankai. However, the weapon spec of it isn't as good as Bankai's weapon spec, but it pretty much does the same thing. Next up is going to be Raikid Shizen. Now, Raikid Shizen's mode is going to be in the really good tree above Rengoku. Now, the reasoning it is not broken anymore is because it actually did get nerfed. However, it is going to remain in really good simply because it makes a lot of combos possible and it still does a ton of damage when you don't have someone stunned. I mean, when you have someone stunned. Next is going to be Sabaru. Now, Sabaru is actually going to be in good above Ink. Now, the reason for this is because it does stun and it does put someone on the ground. It is really fun to use in general. However, it doesn't really have that much utility. It is a very 1v1 oriented ability as well. Also, they can block it. Next up is going to be Sand. Sand's going to be at the bottom of good. Now, the reasoning for this is because Sand, if you guys did not know this, it is a Z-spec and you can fly with it. But it is actually an auto dodge. If you guys use this, it is an auto dodge. It is really cool. In general, it is a free auto dodge on a Z-spec. And I feel like since more people know this now, maybe it'll go up in the tier list based on if people use it more or less. But I have not faced it that much because people do not know it is actually an auto dodge. Next up is going to be Satori Akuma. Now, Satori Akuma is going to be in broken at the bottom. Now, the reasoning for this is because the weapon spec is extremely overpowered. The weapon spec is really good, and it has all the benefits of being an Akuma. Not to mention the C spec is really annoying to fight because you think they dead, but they're not dead, man. They're not dead. Now you're dead. Next up is going to be Seishin. Now, Seishin, in my opinion, is going to be at the top. Not the top. It's going to be at the bottom of meh. I feel like Seishin's mode is actually one of the worst things about Seishin. You do get buffed M1 damage, but with the mode, the C-spec is a stun. However, it has end lag, so you can't attack while using it, which makes it extremely bad because you will actually get caught out if you use this against someone and they know what to do. Next up is going to be Sengoku. Now, Sengoku, guys, I know some of you are going to get really mad at this, but I'm putting it at the bottom of good. And the only reasoning it's at the bottom of good is simply because you can get perfect Susanoo, which increases your M1 damage by a bunch. I feel like Sengoku's mode is one of the worst modes for a 1 in 200 bloodline in the game. It is absolutely terrible as a mode. I don't even know why they made it that way. Next one's going to be Senko. Now, Senko is actually going to be at the bottom of good. Now, the reasoning for this is because it increases your speed, it does a ton of damage, and it basically has all the same benefits as all the other Senkos. Next up is going to be Shadow. Now, Shadow is actually going to be at the bottom of men. Now, the reasoning for this is actually going to be the exact same as Seishin, but you don't get buffed M1s, which makes it inherently worse than Seishin, even though it does practically the same thing. Next up is going to be Shindai. Now, Shindai is actually going to be in the broken tree at the bottom. Now, while Shindai's abilities were nerfed, the C-spec was not, and the C-spec is still extremely good. It is actually an auto dodge and a counter combined. If you guys didn't know that, it is also a counter and an auto dodge, and it does a ton of damage. Not to mention they actually get 3 free Shindai clones. It is just extremely good, extremely broken, and you also get the Susanoo bonus from an Akuma. Actually, I'm actually gonna move it up in the list. I'm gonna put it third above Riser. That's how good it is. Next up is actually going to be Shizen. Now, Shizen is actually going to be Raiken Shizen's, but worse. It does not, do as much damage. So, it's actually going to be below Raiken Shizen on the good tree. I'm going to put it at the top of good because you can still do the same Raiken Shizen combo, but it just doesn't do nearly as much damage. Next up is going to be Storm. Storm is going to be at the bottom of good. Now, the reasoning for this is simply because Storm did get a C-spec added, which makes Storm better, or otherwise it would have been in bad. Next up is going to be Tengoku. Now, Tengoku is going to be in broken, but where is actually going to be the biggest thing about Tengoku? How broken is it? In my opinion, I feel like Tengoku is going to be below Shindai Akuma because the C-spec of Tengoku is the only thing that makes Tengoku so broken. It is one of the highest damage abilities in the game, if not the highest damage ability in the game. Not to mention that it is also extremely easy to hit, especially if they're stunned. Also, your speed gets buffed a ton and you get free M1 bonus. Next up is going to be Glacier. Now, Glacier, in my opinion, is going to be at the bottom of good. It is one of those that actually just got a C-spec added recently. And the C-spec is pretty decent, but it does drain your chi a ton. It's kind of like Acid's move, if you guys know what I'm talking about. It's just that, but worse. But yeah, guys, that's actually it for this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the comment for more, and hopefully see you in the next one. Bye-bye, guys.